don't show emotion when you're rebuking your kid. If you let your emotion show, like if you're just yelling or crying at them or something like that, that's all they're going to see. They're not going to hear what you're saying. They're just going to see what you're feeling. Welcome to Dadsplaining, a weekly chronicle of all the weirdest, messiest, grossest, and funniest parts of fatherhood, hosted by two first-time dads. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And this week, we are going to be talking about discipline, how to discipline your kids, more specifically your toddlers and babies, because that's kind of the stage that we're in. Mm-hmm. What to do when they're rebellious, when they just don't do what you want them to do, or when they do what you don't want them to do. But before we get into all of that, Brandon, if our listeners want to reach out to us with questions or comments, where can they find us?
Please check us out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. You can drop us an old school line via email at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com, and you can check out this and every episode anywhere you get your podcasts.
That's right. And speaking of connection, we got some cool reviews in this week on iTunes. I wanted to give a shout out to these two. First off, iTunes user Killavipin, I hope I'm saying that correctly, says, funny and relatable. Jesse and Brandon are a hoot. Dadsplaining is funny and relatable. A thoroughly enjoyable listen.
Excellent. I haven't been a hoot before, so that's awesome.
No one has ever called me a hoot.
I know.
So I really appreciate that. Also, Nunyo Bid, iTunes username, which I actually believe is our friend Karina, who was a guest on the podcast several episodes back, says, funny, witty, and smart. But enough about me. These new dads talk about their journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly every step of the way. They aren't afraid to ask for advice either. They really are funny, witty, and smart. So even if your kids are older, you'll still enjoy it.
Excellent. And if you want to hear Karina's funny, witty, and smartness, you can check out that episode where we interviewed her.
Yep, that was Parenting a Child with Autism. That was several weeks ago. So go ahead and give that a listen. But wait until you're done listening to this one.
Absolutely.
Also, we got a recommendation on our Facebook page from Kenny Lewis. Kenny says, I recommend that any new or old parent come here not only to laugh, to be inspired, and to gain insight into the crazy world of parenting, but also to offer laughter, inspiration, and insightfulness too. That is so awesome, nice. And we really appreciate that, Kenny. Thanks for the kind words.
Definitely get us those old parents. Sorry, that just sounded funny to me.
No, it's fine. So, Brandon, what's new with Noah this week?
Quite a decent amount of activity, nothing too crazy going on, but, we're starting to get a little bit more on the vocabulary side of things. Mm-hmm. So I was just trying to go through the list of what I've been taking down. He's been saying wow a lot. I'm pretty sure he's got bubble. He really likes bubbles.
Yes, bubble's a good one.
David loves bubbles.
Yes, he does, and he says bubba.
Nice. That's what I thought.
Which is also his word for pacifier.
I feel like wubble was like in there somewhere like that. He really likes his sippy cup, so he's saying cup.
Oh, really? That's a great one.
He gets really jazzed and or upset if he does or does not get his cup. Mm-hmm. Like there's a specific moment at daycare where they've gone outside to play and they come in and everyone gets their cups.
Yeah.
Sometimes, because we're terrible parents, we forget to send his sippy cup.
Oh.
And so they have sippy cups on hand that they can give out to the kids in case the parents forget, thankfully. So our child doesn't just get dehydrated. But because he doesn't have it there, he gets served last if he doesn't have his own sippy cup. And so he'll see all the other kids get their sippy cups, and then he's like, no, cup. He's like pointing, he's like, mine. And he feels betrayed, and I feel like the worst parent because I'm just like, yep, that's my kid that I've just said, you know what, I don't even want to give you water today. That's how awesome I am.
Oh, my God. No, but that is a really cool sign, though, that he's able to signal, for what he wants and what he doesn't want, and he's using that word cup. I don't even think David has cup yet.
Yeah,
so that's pretty cool.
Keep in mind, listen, he's not like dropping this every time, but he's said it at least once that I can tell. He's also doing a couple of phrases now, like, what's that?
Really?
And again, it was like once or twice, and he's just being like, what's that? Because we say that a lot. Yeah. And I'm noticing that the things he's picking up, of course, are things that we say a ton. Because normally whenever he picks up something to engage with, we're like, ooh, what's that, Noah? What have you got there? Because we want him to talk about or say the thing that he's playing with, like a ball. Yeah. And so we say, oh, what's that? And he hasn't picked up the words for what he's playing with. He's just picked up what's that.
Yeah, so he's got the framework, It's like learning a new language. You know that there's something there. You just got to figure out the syllables.
Exactly. So now he's going to parent it back to us. He's like, what's that? He's going to test our knowledge. So we're having some fun with that. And then we are actually getting ready to go on a trip ourselves.
Oh, that's right.
So we will take all of the lessons that Jesse gave to us in the previous week's episode. So if you guys haven't checked that out, Jesse gave a full deep dive on his trip.
Yeah, that was cruising with a baby, taking a cruise with a toddler, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That was 2 episodes ago.
Exactly. So if you want to be terrified about traveling with a child, check that out. And then we're doing our own version of it this weekend, so we will report back on how well it went for us.
That's awesome. I look forward to hearing all about it.
Yeah, so super busy on our side. How have things been going with you, Jesse?
So they've been chugging right along. No huge developments in the past week. David has begun to add hey to his vocabulary a little bit more. You know, when he sees us, it's hey, which is kind of cool, because before it would just be like mama or dada.
Oh, good. Know? He's downgraded you. You're not mama or daddy anymore. You're like, hey, you.
Yeah, but you know, the cool thing about that is I think he's developing that universal greeting. You know what I mean? Something he can kind of give to everybody.
Sure.
He's also being more responsive to questions now. You know, so when I pick him up from daycare, I'll say, "Did you have a good day at daycare today?" And he'll say something like, "Yeah," or "Yeah." You know, he kind of knows that there's a positive response that goes in there, and he says that to everything. I could ask him, "Did you go to the moon today?" He'd go, "Yeah." You know, so whatever. But he knows that I think he understands the intonation, you know, of a question, and he knows that he's supposed to answer it, which is really cool. He also showed us a new trick last night. Ashley taught him this a while back, where she'll spin around in a circle and say, "Now you," and then he'll spin around in a circle. But what he's added to it is that he'll spin around in a circle and then fall down on his butt dramatically.
Perfect.
And then laugh, you know. And of course, we're laughing and clapping, so he's going to do it more and more.
Nice.
Of course, now also he'll just do that to anything. So if we try and, you know, wave our arms in the air and say, "Now you," he'll go, "Oh, now me," and then he'll spin around in a circle and fall down on his butt.
Perfect.
Like, that's the one I've got. What do you want?
Yeah, listen, we don't all have 3 tricks in our bag. We've just got the one good one.
Yeah,
awesome.
But yeah, I mean, you know, just fun little developments like that. Nothing huge going on, but those fun little things that kind of, you know, spice things up from week to week. So on to this week's topic, discipline. We started talking about this last week because our kids are kind of getting to that age where they're pushing their limits. They're kind of testing, what can I rebel against? Where can I get my parents to bend to my will?
Everywhere.
And, you know, we're getting to that stage where we're having to start imposing limits and borders, you know what I mean, and boundaries. And that's a really difficult thing to do, especially when your kid does not do what you want them to do. I mean, there's a million different answers to this. Everyone's going to tell you something different. So it's really hard to know what to do. But, you know, I guess the bottom line of it is every kid is different. So every kid's going to do something different and respond to a different technique. So Brandon, what kind of experience have you had with this so far?
So we've got 2 different, you know, somewhat situations where, you know, my son's about 15 months. Yours is a few months older than that. So it's not a huge difference, but it's enough to, I think, put him in different states in terms of the discipline. So our son has not really gotten into, like, big tantrums just yet. But he's always kind of been in this frame where, like, if he gets stuck in any situation or if anything doesn't go as he expects it to go, he's just, you know, starts whining out a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's not really crying. He's not really full-blown meltdowning unless you just don't help him right away. So early on, we would just, like, if he got stuck with a toy in, like, a corner, before he learned how to, like, turn around or things like that, he would just be like, you know, he's pushing his little push car and he, like, hits a wall.
Yeah.
And then he just keeps trying to push it because he doesn't understand that he's stuck and he has to turn around. And so he'd be like, whoa, whoa, you know, and he would start kind of whining. So eventually we taught him how to turn around and he finally figured it out. So that's nice. But this still kind of happens with us. And even to this day, even though he knows how to turn around, he will still hit, like, a wall. And before he does it, he's like, why is this happening to me? Woe is me, woe is me. And it can be that way with just about anything. Like, you didn't pick me up fast enough, or, hey, I see a cookie over there. I really want that. Why don't I get one?
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that we're dealing with. And it took us a while to kind of realize that the best first approach, I think, is just, I'm going to say ignoring. And if you kind of check out different language that we're going to talk through, there's different versions of this, like redirecting or ignore and redirect, and basically doing things so that the kid will either figure it out themselves or you kind of distract them.
Yeah.
That works somewhat well at this kind of early stage. So when I say ignoring, I don't mean we just don't listen to him at all and we just kind of do it. But the problem is if you just keep solving it for them, then they won't learn.
Exactly.
And I'm a person who loves to solve it for them.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, I would just, like, go and help him. redirect him literally by like turning him around or picking up a toy and giving it to him or picking him up. I'm a softie. So that makes me a prime parent candidate for my child to like eat my lunch basically and just do whatever he wants and abuse me as much as needed until he gets his way. So it's really difficult to kind of learn, because I'm just like a go with the flow kind of guy. And I'm like, he's playing great. If I literally just like turn this car around sideways, he'll just keep going and going and going. Or if I move him from this room to that room, he'll be in a good shape. And so to me, it was always just like, he's not really upset. Why would I want him to get upset?
Right.
Why don't I just kind of deal with this and help him out really quickly because he's having a good time and I don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
And I always felt like if I just didn't do anything and I ignore him, he's just going to whine and whine and whine and whine, and then I'm going to get unhinged.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start whining with some more, overt language. Which probably shouldn't be shared. So it takes a while to kind of learn that you have to do a little bit of the ignoring. And then some of the stuff is this kind of concept of redirecting. And Jesse, I know you shared about this briefly, I think, when like you had a specific incident of a tantrum. But I know that you guys have done a good bit of this kind of redirecting.
Yeah. This is something that that Ashley and I have started to do more and more, especially now that we're kind of taking David out of just the home environment or just the daycare environment. So he goes to the store with us, he goes out to dinner more and more with us.
Nice.
And it happens so much where he'll be fine up to a point, and then he'll get upset about one thing, and that'll totally ruin his mood.
Yeah.
And I like to not just redirect, but even give him a total change of scenery, if that's what'll do the trick. So if we're out to dinner and he's sitting in his high chair and then he gets upset because we take his crayons away, that he's coloring on the table with, I'll lift him up, take him out of the high chair and take him outside and just walk around the parking lot with him, basically. Yeah. And usually that works pretty quickly, where he'll forget what he was upset about because there's all this brand new stimulation in his face, something new to think about. And that's something that a lot of parenting blogs will talk about with redirection. It's just giving them something new to focus on.
Sure.
Because kids have short attention spans at this age. They can only really grasp one thing at a time. So if you throw something new at them, they're going to have to drop the thing that they were upset about before. And they might still be in a bad mood, but it doesn't last that long.
Yeah, fair. And then kind of going along with this this concept, it's just so funny. Every time we kind of think about a topic, it feels like the universe provides some fodder, whether in our own lives or just other parents' lives. So saw some chatter on social media from just some other local parents in our neighborhoods, and they were talking about a specific incident with a child who was having a tantrum. And then, of course, there was a lot of comments from people about, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. And there was one in particular I wanted to mention. So there was a book, which I'm going to tell you, I haven't read it, but I've just kind of got the gist down, and you can do this too. So I'm not advocating that you buy the book, but you just kind of get the gist, and you can kind of understand it. Relatively simple. It follows along this concept of redirecting in a way, and it's by Janet Lansbury. And it's called No Bad Kids. And so the kind of concept, as best I can try to distill it, we have kids that are still pretty on the young side, and so they don't really understand cause and effect very well. So if they make a mistake or they do something and they get upset, we can't quite explain to them, you're throwing a tantrum, you need to stop, or you did this and that made you upset, or you're doing this and it makes me upset. And so we have to kind of do some combination of, I believe it's referred to in this version as like connect and redirect. And so the idea being that first we try to understand what's going on. So there's two sides to this. There's the kid's side and there's the parent's side, right? So the kid, we try to interact with him and say, what's going on? What are you feeling? Why are you feeling so angry, sad, whatever it is? And there's usually a reason. Right, and if your kid can't really communicate with you, it's going to be difficult to probably do this with like a lot of flowing language and like the back and forth discussion. Yeah. But why are they throwing the tantrum? What happened? And maybe it's as simple as like, I want my water cup. Okay, and then you could solve it. But if it's something where you don't want to give in, or they're doing something bad and you won't let them do it, then it's just about understanding and letting them know that you're hearing them. And asking them like, what does that make you feel? Why do you feel this way? And then you move into the kind of redirecting, like Jesse kind of talked about, where you could change the environment. You could remind them that, hey, you were having fun before this. Don't you want to go back to playing with this toy? You can kind of move on from there. So I kind of like the idea of helping them understand a little bit.
Yeah.
It's very difficult with young kids. I mentioned my son's vast vocabulary of like bubble and cup. So he's not going to be able to answer me very astutely when I say, why are you upset today? No, we're not going to sit on the couch for therapy and like have an in-depth discussion.
Yeah.
So, for me, maybe it's less about the connecting. But it's probably still a good idea. And I do try to do this. We try to do this of being like, what happened, Noah? Why are you, what's wrong? What do you want? Just trying to get him to hear the questions so that maybe he can point. And I mentioned cup as a word. Maybe he can point and be like, cup, like I wanted water. Now, this is usually part of the list of things you run down as a parent anyway. You're like, okay, are they wet? Did they poop? Did they need food? Do they need water? Do they need milk? Are they tired? Like, whatever it is, right? So instead of kind of running through the checklist yourself, maybe kind of check it out with the kid. And that's also useful from the parenting side of things, which I hadn't really thought about. But, like, we get really angry when our kids get angry.
Yeah.
And so if we also stop to take a moment to think about it and be like, why am I getting kind of jacked up as well? Like, of course, the crying.
Yeah.
But, like, I need to understand why my child is upset because maybe there's a valid reason.
Yeah.
Or it's just better that I understand what might be setting them off so that I can better facilitate the situation. So
yeah, there's something interesting there about trying to develop emotional intelligence for yourself and for your kid. We didn't pick this topic this week to get into debates on should you spank your kids or not, that kind of stuff. But there's something, a really, really insightful thing I heard one time was from actually one of our hosts here at WSB Radio, Eric Von Hessler in Atlanta. He was talking about spanking, and he said, I had to stop myself one time as a parent because as I was getting ready to spank my kid, I thought, okay, how much of this is discipline and how much of this is just me angry trying to let out my anger.
Yeah.
And I think that if we're able to stop and kind of recognize not just like what are our kids upset about, but like how much of my mood right now is from my kid being upset and how much of that is from other things that have happened to me throughout the day. If you can kind of sort all that out, I think it'll just clear your head a little bit and make you a little bit better at listening to your kid and then figuring out the right way to deal with them. Just a little side note there, but just something that we all need to think about as dads.
No, perfect. I mean, it's funny because as I was reading this, there's a sheet or a PDF related to the book, I believe, the No Bad Kids book I was talking about. It kind of has like a checklist that you can kind of run through of this like connecting and redirecting approach. And it's pretty lengthy. And so I read it and I was laughing with my wife. And I was like, there's no way a parent is going to like pull out a checklist in a tantrum and be like, okay, let me make sure I'm running through the list here.
Exactly,
and it's like a two-step thing, connect and redirect. But as I read it, I'm like, well, connecting has like 3 questions that you're supposed to ask yourself first, then engage with the child. Then redirecting, there's like 3 different ways you can redirect. And I'm like, who's going to take like a 10-step process to do this? And my wife being the wonderful sounding board and brilliant person just kind of cut through that and be like, well, you have to. Like, you should be doing these things. Like, you should be asking those questions. And it doesn't take very long to do it either. So, I mean, it sounds daunting. And no one's going to just, like, literally check the boxes. So, I mean, we all know that, it's more about absorbing the material and just kind of being aware as a parent. And then it's totally up to you. Handle it how you want to. Do some of the steps, ask yourself, 1 of the 2 of the questions. You don't have to follow it to the T. No one's going to do that. But just the idea of being exposed to the material.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I say, sorry to the people who wrote the book. We're using your fodder and your material, and I'm telling people not to buy it. But like, you could just kind of get like a download of the overview and kind of go with that.
Yeah.
And just give you a little bit of guidance.
Right.
I think is useful because I never really thought about it. You don't think about it until they start happening. The best parts of parenting are the blissful ignorance until you get to a point where you're encountering something terrifying like a tantrum, and then you're like, oh, crap, now I have to deal with that. And your best response, your first response is usually just that anger.
Yeah.
And it gets me just really riled up, and I'm like, why does my child hate me so much?
No, I know.
Why are you just yelling and yelling and yelling? And, I'm kind of like a stone wall. Like, I can take some of the yelling, but you just know that it's like needling you in your heart on the inside, and you're just like, I'm going to No, okay. I'm going to punish someone. And so I love that story about the spanking because I think it is part of you and what's happening in your life, but then you're just gonna have a really visceral reaction to any kind of a tantrum.
Well, and there's one tip that I read in another. I think this was a blog from a website called 0to3.org. I'll include a list in the show notes. But the point that they put out there was, don't show emotion when you're rebuking your kid. And that's not to say be very calm and soft in everything you say and do with them, because that. Kids need walls. They need to know that there's a boundary here and you can't cross it. But if you let your emotion show, like if you're just yelling or crying at them or something like that, that's all they're going to see. They're not going to hear what you're saying. They're just going to see what you're feeling. And then eventually, as they grow into the terrible twos where they're learning to manipulate you, the little devils that they are, they're going to use your emotion against you. So it's important to keep that composure, and it's not always easy to do, and you're not going to be perfect at it. Like, I'm not perfect at it. But that's just something to kind of strive for. So there were a couple of other just practical tips that I picked up from this blog and then a couple of others. One thing is, this really surprised me, was don't overuse the word no. And when people say that, they're not saying no's a dirty word and you should never say it. No's an important word, but the practical side of that is the more you use it to the point of overusing it and you don't back it up with consequences, it's going to lose its meaning for your kids. So if you're always saying, no, don't do that, no, don't do that, and you can't back up every no. It's physically impossible. They're just going to tune it out, and they're not going to hear it, and it's not going to have the impact that it really should have when you're setting boundaries with kids. They're saying that a lot of the behavior that may annoy you, but it isn't necessarily destructive or harmful to other people or really dangerous, learn to let some things go. If your kid wants to wear the same pajamas every night, maybe wash them while they're at daycare and just let them do it. Like, if it's not hurting anything, like they're at that age where they're experimenting and learning new things, let that one go and then reserve your no's for the things that really are important.
Right.
Something else that was cool was give them choices instead of just saying, no, don't do this, do that instead. Do you want to get in the car seat yourself or do you want me to do it for you? And then if they just refuse to do it, then pick them up and put them in there. But don't yell at them while you're doing it, because then again, you're showing your emotion. Enforcing limits, don't give in to tantrums no matter how hard it is. There's something to be said for, like you said at the beginning, ignoring and redirecting. Sometimes you've just got to put the kid in his bed when it's bedtime, walk out, close the door, and let them cry it out until they fall asleep. If they refuse to go to sleep and it's half an hour of crying, obviously you need to change your strategy.
You can interact.
But at a certain point, you do need to be able to enforce that limit, walk away, and let them kind of figure it out on their own and develop their own independence. I would say also what works for me, I said at the beginning, a change of scenery. Sometimes it's taking them to the thing that they don't want to do, and then once they get there, they're fine with it. David, when it's bedtime, he will scream and cry because we're taking him away from the downstairs, which is kind of his play zone, right?
Spot,
but as soon as I get him up the stairs and into his bedroom and I turn on his lullaby music, it's an instant change of mood, because I think he finally gives in. He's like, okay, I'm not going to get what I want. I guess I might as well just kind of go along with this. And then he realizes, oh yeah, I do kind of like bedtime.
Or distracted by what they're doing. Like I find this a lot at nighttime, especially because it's like some nights it's completely toss of the coin where my son will like hate bath time. And he'll be like, because you're taking me away from my playing.
Right.
But I know that if I don't put him in the bath, he's going to get cranky because he's tired. And he doesn't understand, doing that appropriately. So now I kind of make a deal out of like, ooh, it's bath time. And I'm like filling up the tub and he can hear it. And I'm like, you want to do the bath? And then he'll walk over to it himself. Because he wants to get in and play, because he knows bath time is fun.
Exactly, make him part of it.
And then when you put him in, like he might cry for the first minute or two, but then he'll start seeing his toys and he'll start playing, and then it's like it's all is forgotten. And the same kind of thing with nighttime. He might get like really squirmy, because my son just has never really been one of like physical contact in like a very extended period of time. Like he doesn't really like to be held too much for too long of a time. If you read a book, he'll like come and cuddle up with you, but then he'll like jump back out like a minute later. But just kind of knowing that like if he's really fighting it, just put him down. And then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes he just goes to sleep because he's just been tired and he's cranky and squirmy because he's just tired and he's trying to tell you that. So It doesn't work all the time, but some of the things that I've learned the best about like diffusing it is just to kind of either let it be or just move on to the next thing, like do the bath time, do the bedtime, just like go forward in your plan and just see if the child will respond and be like, oh, thank you, I did want to go to sleep, and me being, a fussy baby was telling you like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is that kind of along those lines, if you give your kids a chance to participate and do things on their own, they're going to be happier about it, because at least in the twos and the pre-twos, they're starting to want to do things for themselves. And I think as parents, sometimes we have this tendency to want to do things for our kids because we don't want them to have hard lives or be unhappy. It's like when Noah pushes his thing into the corner and you want to just turn him around instinctively. I get that. Like, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
But if you let your kid be part of the process and do part of the work involved, it kind of, I think, starts to feel like play for them. If we let David walk up the stairs or crawl up the stairs on his own to go to bed, it's going to be a little better than if I'm physically carrying him, kicking and screaming the entire way.
Yeah.
I think it kind of takes their minds off of things. And, and just one last note, speaking of bedtime, if you're just using your kid's room as the place to sleep, they're going to have a harder time wanting to go to bed. So for the longest time, David's room was just to change diapers and sleep. But now we're trying to engage him by taking books off the bookshelf in his room, letting him sit in there and read, letting him play with toys in his room. So that bedroom is not just a place where he's going to be separated from mom and dad. It can also be a fun place too. I don't know that every parent is in that situation. I think some parents really use their kids' rooms for a lot of stuff, and that's the way to go. But we didn't do that for a long time, and now we're starting to.
I think that makes sense. There's ways of doing it. Everyone's going to do it differently. One other example that I was thinking of, someone talked about their child who was, throwing tantrums, and the mom is like, how do I deal with it? And the answer is, well, good luck, right? It's difficult. But it was mentioned that in one particular instance, the kid is like with mom at home all the time. And I was kind of thinking about how I do believe there's a lot of specific benefits to being in daycare. And I know both of our kids are in daycare, so, it's kind of hard. We're both pro daycare if you can do it. But I do think that helps as well in terms of the structure, the routine, boundary setting. Like, there's discipline at daycare, but it doesn't have to be heavy-handed, because there's so many kids that if any child is being disciplined, all of the other kids are seeing the discipline.
That's right.
And so they're kind of learning. I think that we have it tougher at home because there's no other kids. There's no copycat discipline going on, if you will, where they monkey see, monkey do.
Learning from others' mistakes, yeah.
And so it's been mentioned before, and I'm starting to kind of believe this, that like kids just push the boundaries more at home because they see the advantage. They don't have a bunch of other kids that they have to fall in line with.
Yeah.
They don't have multiple, teachers watching over them. So they just like kind of know, and it kind of stinks. Like, they're little stinkers, I think.
Yeah.
They come home and they just like feel this sense of like, like, I'm on my home turf. I can do whatever I want. And I'm like, you're 15 months. How are you like processing? Like, you can't process sentences, but you can process this complex diabolical thought process of like, I'm at home. This is my terrain. I will do what I want. I get to ignore the rules here. Mom and dad are nicer to me than my teachers are, and they'll let things slide. And I'm just like, that's so diabolical.
I know.
They think they can get away with it, and then sometimes they do.
Yeah. But you just got to put them to bed, and then, like we said last week, like, vent about it with your wife at the end of the day. Man, what a jerk he was today.
Yeah, like a little like, I mean, you know what? Love our kids, but like, yeah, we can use some of the more colorful language when they've gone to bed.
Once they've gone to bed.
And I do it. A little turd. No. Love my son.
So that'll do it for this week's episode of Dadsplaining. We hope that you were able to take some of this and apply it to your own parenting style. If you have questions or thoughts of your own, tips that you want to share with us on this subject, or really any other, Brandon, where can our listeners reach out to us?
Please like or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can find us at Dadsplaining Podcast. You can send us an email with your thoughts or questions or comments at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. And then check out this episode and every episode every Monday, anywhere you get your podcasts.
That's right. And while you're at it, do us a favor and leave us a rating and please a review, especially on platforms like Apple Podcasts, where the algorithms are based on the rankings and the ratings. We could really use your help connecting with more parents all around the world. I know that we're being listened to in multiple countries right now. So word of mouth is great. Please, tell your friends, your fellow parents, and drop us a rating and a review if you don't mind. So Brandon, what are we going to talk about next week?
So we mentioned in the upfront that about to take a trip with our son. You guys just recently took a trip, so we're going to do a little talking shop about traveling with the kids, as well as the reason that we've been traveling of late, and what I'm doing is we're going to a wedding. So we'll kind of talk about parenting in a bit more formal environment, with crowds, with groups, where you kind of have to go against the grain and try to keep the kids quiet. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about how that goes and mostly how it implodes.
Exactly. So until next time, I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And hey, Brandon, did you know that 95% of people are bad at math?
No.
Yeah, sure am glad I'm in the other 15%.
Hey!
That joke comes courtesy of @DadsPuns on Twitter. We'll see you guys next week.